So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is so exciting. I'm hoping that many of you have joined our previous sessions, and we have much more in store for the HR community. If you don't know me, my name is Veretta Yancey, and I am the founder of a company called HR for All People. And it is a collaborative of HR professionals to kind of get together, network, share resources, also share services, and really have a community of collaboration. So just before we get started, I want to give you some general housekeeping. And so this session is being recorded, and it'll be available to you after the conference for you to share on social media. We'll be on the outlook for your comments. So as we're going through, we'll be looking out for any comments that you have and answering questions. If time permits, of course, we'll open the floor for questions towards the end. And then I want you to to join us for our future session that we have scheduled. Next week, we're going to be doing something a little bit differently, and that's talking about starting your own businesses. So that's going to be exciting to hear some of our professionals talk about starting your own consulting company. And then the following week, it will be some HR secrets that companies don't want you to know. So I'm excited about that. This will be a good time to learn about landing a right role for you and even adding recruiting skills to your portfolio. So that's what this session is about. And as we always say in our sessions, the information that we provide is not considered legal advice. So we encourage you to consult legal counsel as it pertains to your unique situation. So want to make sure that we say our disclaimer. So thank you again for my panelists for joining us today. And what I'm going to do, you guys, is just give a brief intro of them, and then we'll give them a time to further introduce themselves. So first we have Janice Presley, and Janice is out here with me in Los Angeles. She's a principal consultant with the Janice Group, and she has some exciting things to share as a leader in the HR space and tons of experience in recruiting. So we'll hear from her in a minute. Next, we have Fred Thompson, and Fred was referred to me by one of my favorite recruiters. She couldn't join us today, and so she said he would be a great addition to our panel. He comes to us from the Windy City, and he'll actually share some insight as to what it's like working as an internal recruiter, as well as having his own business that is an outsourced provider. He is a recruiting consultant with Outreach Staffing. And then finally, we have Jonetta Williams. Jonetta, if you will wave to the audience, please. So she is in good old hot Atlanta, holding Recruiter Academy certified recruiter, specializing in the recruitment of licensed and certified clinical professionals. So thank you again, you guys. This is great to have you join us, and we have so much to cover in such a short period of time. So I'll give you a chance to introduce yourselves, and if you could give me a favorite recruiting story, that'd be great to start off with. Janice, would you go first?
I sure can. Hi, everybody. I'm Janice Presley. As she mentioned, I am in Southern California. I'm not an HR person by degree or background, but I kind of fell into HR because I used to go out on recruiting trips when I was very early in my career, when my company was looking for engineers. Probably my favorite recruiting story has to deal with internships. So one of the things that I would tell you about me is that I always try to begin with the end in mind. And one of the things that I had the opportunity to do when I was in college was have a variety of internships each year of my college years. And so when I was about to graduate from college, I was able to use that experience to decide what I wanted to do next. At that time, I thought I was going to be an engineer for life. And then after doing it, it was something that I hated. But I really liked just getting to know people and, talking to them about the opportunity with the organization, talking to them about longevity, etc. So probably my favorite recruiting story really has to do with interns. So I've run intern programs, but I've also been the person that recruited them. So I was the person that established relationships on campus, that found the students, that went to their activities on campus to find them, and then basically did full cycle from meeting them on campus, doing the interviews, having them meet the managers all the way through. And then the best part about it is that at the end of those summer internships, I was able to do offer letters. And I'd always plan some big kind of celebration, sort of like an Oprah, you got a job, you got a job, you got a job.
Right.
So those are the things that I really like to do, and really surprise people and kind of welcome them and make them feel welcome. And I think those are the things that are really important when a person comes into an organization, if they feel like they've got the support, they've got a community around them that's going to help them be successful.
Great. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Janetta, will you go next?
I sure will. Again, my name is Janetta Williams. I have been recruiting now for 30 years. I started out recruiting bone marrow transplant or recruiting patients to donate plasma and blood products for the Red Cross. And I met someone there in doing that who told me about staffing. Same thing, people have needs, going out, talking to schools, communities, and drumming up business. So I started staffing. I actually started staffing in the staffing industry. And it was during that time that in staffing, you do everything. You do the sales part where you're going out and you're talking to different companies, but you're also recruiting candidates. You're also doing employee relations. You're doing benefits. You're doing payroll. And it was during that time that I kind of fell into my sweet spot of recruiting. I enjoyed meeting and talking to people. And I think what my passion was we were at the time, we were recruiting administrative level, high level administrative and legal assistants. And the office where I was working at the time was downtown on the corner of J.W. Dobbs and Peachtree. And we had a lot of homeless people walking through the office. And I was to kind of shoo them out or to redirect them. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't just look at a person and they didn't belong. So what I started doing, as people would come in, I would help them get resumes ready. I'd help them with interviewing techniques, just trying to help the underdog get into areas where they otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity. And that's where my passion came in.
Right.
And so I've been recruiting ever since. I've never been going into HR and the other parts of HR. I've always just stayed in recruitment.
Right. That's a great story, actually. It really shows, humanity and how you can't turn people away. So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Great story. Okay, Fred, you're next.
Yeah, ironically, it's a recent story. I started in recruiting from the agency standpoint about over 20 years ago. Basically, a headhunter, which I guess we're not supposed to use that terminology. But that's how I got into the business. And since then, I've migrated to working inside directly for a company. But over the last couple of years, I've also started doing some recruitment on my own. So most recently, like within the last 30 days, my partner and I had a client, which is a huge nonprofit that supplies therapy services, it supplies medical service, and they had a need for a software engineer. Unbeknownst to myself or my partner, we identified a candidate who had actually been a participant of the nonprofit because he had a son with some challenges. So sometimes I still have that headhunter mentality. You get kind of callous about placing people, moving on to the next one, et cetera. We placed a software engineer, and he wrote us this letter, an email, just floored us absolutely about how this specific nonprofit had been so integral in the life of not just him, but his son with a medical condition. And again, we did not know this at all. And he didn't even give us this information until after he had accepted the position, and how he thought it was like an act of, a higher commitment, which had got him actually in place with the company, and how much it meant for him to actually work for them, and he had found a home. So sometimes you do get a bit callous, and you get X amount of recs, you're trying to fill a role and just move on. But the fact that you do change people's lives at certain points, right? People are not maybe happy in a certain situation, or perhaps they haven't found a situation to begin with. But the fact that this gentleman is a software engineer, ended up working for, or is working now for, a nonprofit that had been very integral in the life of him and his son. I mean, that's probably right now moving up the list for me.
Right. No, that's actually good. And, when I think about recruiting, sometimes all the stars have to line up for some people. Mm-hmm. I really want to talk to Janetta, because and this is just me having a limited knowledge about that field of, the medical profession. And I would think that maybe at this point, it would be tough to find candidates in those roles right now. Can you talk to me about that, and really just your experience and dealing with specialized skills, and how you staff diverse candidates?
We were already in a nursing shortage anyway, nationally. And then with the pandemic, you have staff that's getting sick. You have staff that they don't want to work with COVID patients because they don't want to take it home, or they may be high risk themselves. We have a lot of staffing services who are pulling our full-time staff away and paying them double, sometimes even triple money to travel to New York or to other places where you have hotspots. It is very difficult right now. We don't have a lot of candidates coming through. And basically what we're doing is we have PRN staff, which is like an as needed. So we have nurses who are like as needed. And what we've done recently is, if you're PRN plan A, where you only are committed to do one shift per month, we're going back and saying, can you give us 2? Can you give us 3? And so we're actually having to staff that way. We're also hiring a lot of nursing support, PCTs, patient care techs, that will come in and do blood pressure, vital signs. And that way you can at least help the nurse out. So where a nurse may have 3 or 4 patients, she may end up with 5 or 6, but she has a patient care.
But she has support. Okay.
Right. But we are having a very difficult time in addition to already having a nursing shortage.
Right. So, but I like that idea of being creative. And I remember when I was doing some resource management work, one of the things that we talked about is, obviously there's a high demand for project managers, really good project managers. And so that was one of the creative things that we did, was to bring in assistant project managers. And so be able to do some of the administrative work and take that burden off. And you can really make the best use of that time, for that specialized professional. Yep. Okay, good stuff. So Janice, let's talk about your role as a corporate recruiter. I did have a chance to look at your resume, and you had some deep recruiting experience, as well as Janetta.
And it's so funny because as the two of them were speaking, I want to tell you how I got into real HR. So I started off, like I said, going out with the recruiters from my corporate job, because I was the only Black female engineer at the company. And so because they were trying to recruit other Black female engineers, they're like, hey, come go to this event or whatever. So fast forward, I used to go to all the events. Then I was going to a church where I lived in Nebraska at the time, and I was going to a church where a lot of the people were unemployed or underemployed. And the pastor of the church would always send people to me. And he'd say, hey, can you help this person find a job? Help them get a resume. And then I realized that a lot of that had to do with some of them hadn't finished high school, so they didn't have a GED. So I started a GED program at the church.
Oh, wow.
days, I put up a bulletin board, because this was the days before the internet. So I put up a bulletin board at the church that said, you know, XYZ company is hiring. These are the skills. Basically, see Janice if you're interested, that kind of stuff. And I started basically placing people from my church from a volunteer standpoint. And it was just something I did, you know, during the week or on the weekend. Then people would set up times and I'd meet with them to help them, you know, get hired. And so it's funny because when I really took my first HR job, I used my volunteer experience as a supplement to my resume so that I could, you know, get the job, and I got it. And so I would go out and I actually did something like Janetta. It was a nonprofit organization called Inroads. I was the managing director, and my role was to go out and open opportunities with corporations. So I recruited for everybody. So whether it was engineering, people in engineering, education, all kinds of pharmaceutical sales, everything. So I've done it all, including most recently, I worked with a company where we hired doctors, nurses, social workers, etc. So I had the same kind of experiences that Janetta talked about. But one of the crazy things about it is that you have to be creative. And that's how I got into the whole internship space. So because of my internship experience and having recruited for a lot of different companies, I was able to sell that at every company that I've worked in to say, you need people not just going to show up. Let's grow your people. And we did that through internships, from bringing people in out of high school, coming in as college students, transitioning them over to full-time work. And a lot of those people that I put in roles 20, 25 years ago still work for those same companies that did
Right.
that. And not saying it was all me, but it was them, you know, paying attention, listening, getting the skill set, etc. And then they've been able to do the same thing. And so that's why I always tell people, you know, you begin with the end in mind. The end is you want a full-time employee, but sometimes you may or may not be able to quote unquote go and recruit them. Sometimes you have to go out and do something a little different. And even when he was talking about software engineering, so software engineering, people that have tech skills are almost as hard to find as people in the medical field. And I had even convinced my company when I lived in the DC area to start up what's called like a technical boot camp. So they would bring in people who had no tech skills, bring them through a 12-week program, and at the end they have basic tech skills so that they can take some entry-level type roles. And so I think that's one of the things that people need to think about, is that you're not going to always find the people. And if you don't find them, then you can grow your own. You can teach them what you need to know. They don't necessarily have the bad habits from other organizations, but you can bring them in that way. At one point, I had some aspirations of even starting a tech school, just, you know, a school for people who are unemployed, underemployed, to kind of retool them, reskill them. And I think as a recruiter, that's something that all of us are going to have to do going forward, because in the next 10 years, the jobs that we know of today are not going to exist. Technology has taken over a lot of roles that used to exist. And if people are going to remain employed, they're going to have to get some different skills. And the way to do that is through retraining type programs with existing employees to help people be successful.
Right. So it's a couple things. Wow, that was a lot. One, I literally, with a group of friends, had thought about doing the same thing. And this would have been the early 2000s or late 90s, about skill, you know, providing skills, because a lot of the skills many of the skills in technology can be taught through training, and it doesn't require that college
degree, correct.
You know, which we're here now and we're seeing that. So that was great to hear. The other thing that you talked about is how you grew yourself as a recruiter and use skills that you developed from volunteering to be able to apply to resumes for corporate roles. Right? And another thing that you talked about that I thought was great is how you creatively collected or established feeder opportunities within those roles. So whether it's an internal organization or whether it's external, preparing people is huge. And again, it's almost like, you know, caring for people is in the DNA of professionals. You cannot do this role
without caring.
Out literally caring for people and trying to help them. So that was great. But look, let me ask you this though. There was a Facebook posting where a recruiter, she was confronted, challenged. And what she was saying is that she did the process of recruiting. She had her candidate slate. She presented the slate to her leadership, and it just so happened, the hiring manager, it just so happened that every candidate was an African American. Now, I don't know if she did that deliberately, or, because there's ways around, right? There's bias, there's, so we know that. We're not even going to get into that subject. But I don't know if she did that deliberately, or if she legitimately, purposefully said, I want to find the best candidate, the most qualified candidate for this role. And when she presented that slate, it brought some resistance. It caused her to, or they asked her to show her process in recruiting. So she had, it just, it was a lot of extra work for her to prove that it wasn't done, on purpose to bring African Americans. So, and as recruiters, when you're submitting a slate, you are helping the manager to make the best decision on the role. And sometimes the manager makes a decision that's most comfortable. Mm-hmm. So give me your thoughts on this, because there's a lot going on around.
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts. So if COVID-19 had not happened, I would say that was something very easy to happen, because we weren't necessarily, you're talking to somebody on the phone and you don't know what they look like or who they are until they get there. Sometimes you may be able to guess by name or, things that they put on their resume, but if they have a vanilla name, you may or may not. And so, but now in the days of COVID, everybody's doing Zoom meetings, Zoom interviews, face-to-face, so they get to see the person. Most people will go out on LinkedIn and look at somebody's profile to try to guess, and a lot of people have pictures, some people don't. But again, I wouldn't necessarily say that the recruiter did anything wrong. I would say that they probably brought the best candidate. Now, as a recruiter, one of the things that I've always tried to do, especially in organizations where I had no diversity, I would always make sure that I had some diverse candidates, whether they were, diverse by, male, female. I've even had candidates who had different religions that said, hey, I can't work on Saturdays. I worked in retail for a number of years. And so there's just a lot you can do. There's some companies that say we only recruit people from this particular college or this particular organization, or only recruit people that are a member of this professional organization. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get at diversity. But like I said, for me, especially for interns, I would say 99% of the interns that I've recruited have been of color. Not all African American, but they've been of color. And I would say probably the other 1% were Caucasian. And it was intentional because those particular organizations needed diversity. And or the one company that was probably 80% diverse, which is a tech company, I would say we probably could have recruited more non-minorities, just because it was kind of skewed the other way, because probably half of the employees were from either India or Africa. And so that's just a different mix. And that was the first time that I had ever worked in a really, really, truly diverse organization, and it was in the tech space. And unfortunately, because we don't have the number of people in technology in the United States, probably 80% of those people came from around the world. So it wasn't just people from the United States. In fact, I probably had maybe 20 people who were Americans. Everybody else was from somewhere else, which is sad. And it's because we don't have the tech space. And so that was another reason that I was like, hey, we really need to grow our own people.
Grow your own.
We really need to do this, because if we don't, and then now, fast forward, we're in COVID, and a lot of those people cannot go home, or cannot, meaning go back home out of the country. And then all of the limitations that they have just being here as H-1 employees is ridiculous. I remember having one person, this is a kind of a side story, one person who had just come to the country, was working for us. His mom passed away, and he couldn't even go home for the funeral because he would basically be subject to being stuck in India because of the laws about how you can come in and out of the country.
Right,
so
right.
All of those things just kind of mix in. But like I said, with
Right.
the days of COVID and everything that's going on right now, it's just different. I wouldn't be opposed at all. I mean, even in my current organization, it's pretty diverse, but not diverse at the higher level. So.
Right, right. So Fred, let's talk about this. So one of the things that I think about is sometimes as an HR manager, you're put in that situation where the best candidates are African American. So, one of the things that I'm thinking is if they are using an external placement agency or outsource for specific roles, then that will at least help with some of the bias within, that could be, portrayed or, suspicion of bias within the organization. So let's talk about your career path and just your role in, starting your own business and that kind of thing. And then how HR professionals can be reaching out, as an extension, using these outplacement agencies as an extension for them.
Yeah, well, so for me, I'll start with how I got to the point with my own business. Out of necessity, as most things happen with most inventions. I had been with Reynolds / Pacta for a few years, and I was part of a downsizing. And I'd always thought about going out on my own. So I had an opportunity because I had built so many relationships within the industry to go ahead and go out on my own and start sourcing professionals, again, primarily in manufacturing engineering over the last couple of years. And a lot of it was just due to being comfortable enough with my contacts, constant networking. One of the pros about working on your own is you can be a little bit selective in terms of what you want to work on and who you want to work with. The cons is there are no off days, right? I mean, you're always constantly trying to develop business. So that's been a big part.
Really? There are no off days? So
there are no off days, But I will say, conversely, one of the negative things about being a corporate recruiter, there's a term I coined, you can't hide when you're inside. You can kind of decide when you're working on your own who it is you want to work with or what you want to work on. When you work as a corporate or an inside recruiter, that hiring manager is going to want an update on a regular basis. So, I mean, that's one of the cons. Once you get inside working for a company, you have to produce. I mean, they're going to ask, you guys are talking about customer slates and we need to have X amount of people and I want to see X amount of candidates. One of the freedoms of having your own agency is you really just get to find that right one or two and present those as opposed to trying to find a multitude. To Janice's point, though, I think you asked a question in terms of the criteria, going back to the Facebook recruiter, and the question was, well, why are you presenting so many African-American or whatever the race or nationality may be? A lot of that, at least when I worked inside, can be resolved in the intake session, where you hold hiring managers to certain questions or standards. What are we looking for? I'm looking for 5 years of experience. I'm looking for somebody, let's say it's an engineer with Pro-E or SolidWorks. I'm looking for someone who's got 5 years of supply chain and may have certain certifications. So if they happen to be African-American, Hispanic American, or whatever it may be, female candidates, you make sure that that hiring manager has agreed upon what it is, what the selection criteria is going to be. So this is not some covert operation where I'm trying to present certain type of candidates.
Exactly.
These are the ones that we agreed upon, that we left the huddle in agreement with. These are the folks that these are the skills.
And you did it ahead of time before.
You did that ahead of time. So you cannot hold.
Exactly.
And they sometimes get frustrated when you go back and show, well, when we talked last week, these were the 8 things that we were looking for. These candidates happen to be of a certain nationality or gender, and they've got 8 of those things. So I think leveraging from the outset, that intake meeting, leveraging that with the hiring manager can kind of safeguard them thinking that you're trying to have some type of bias in terms of candidacy. But again, what motivated me in terms of going back or starting on my own was really necessity and the confidence after having been doing this for a while that, hey, I'm able to do this on my own. I would recommend anybody, if they, for the most part, want to go out on their own, there's nothing wrong with starting inside, to be able to learn even how you're going to operate from a strategic standpoint as your own business. But then that gives you the confidence once you've done that, you've got the networking to be able to go out and do it on your own. So that's pretty much how I got to this point.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm obviously have a passion around bringing in the right people into the organization and having a diverse, not just diversity of thought, but I think diversity of thought comes from the diversity of experiences and backgrounds and race, ethnicity, veterans, disability, all of those, I think, bring a well-rounded team, and you're able to look at something as a whole, and if you can solve that problem and agree within your own team, it is an amazing product that you have to bring to the world, and you find yourself not being in embarrassing situations as an organization, right, with your brand, because you've now done something and or had some message out there, or we've all seen the advertisements, right, where it's like, oh no, that was actually offensive, that's not flattering. So having a diverse product team, for example, will help to eliminate those embarrassing moments for companies. So
yeah, I want to add something right quick. I think part of the process is it's a concept that I've termed as relatability. So as a recruiter, and you feel confident that the candidate has met all the expectations on paper, everything, they have to be relatable to the hiring manager and the hiring team. So much so that that's what gets them hired.
Right.
Even though they have the skill set and all of that, it's all about that person being relatable. And so I will tell you that when I moved to California, I'm not from here, didn't know anything about it. 6 months in, the company that I was working for laid me off and basically said, but you can go look. And they got rid of HR and said, hey, you can go look somewhere else within the company and move again. Well, I had just bought a house like 4 months early. I had moved in December and this was April. And I'm like, I'm not moving again. That's not going to happen. So just give me my severance and let me go do me. Well, I started interviewing. I know I look good on paper. So I got the first interviews. I got the second interviews. I got the third interviews. I got the fourth interviews. But when it was time to make an offer, guess what? I didn't get an offer. Why didn't I get an offer? Because they couldn't relate to me. Why couldn't they relate to me? Here in California, people wear t-shirts and jeans and ball caps that are executives to an interview, and I stroll in a suit and they look at me like, that ain't gonna work. I have gone to interviews where the hiring manager, who was the head of HR, the head of the legal department, had on literally yoga pants and a tank top. And I'm there with a suit on and I look crazy. So they couldn't hear anything that I said, even though I know that I'm a great candidate, I'm articulate, I have the experience, all of that, but they could not hear anything I said because of that. So one of the things that I've had to do personally, especially being in California, because it's real relaxed here, is really kind of be somebody that I'm not necessarily who I am. So I become an actress when I become an interview, and I'm so serious, and I do everything I can to make sure that it's relatable. And so, like I told you, that I just started a new role. This is my second week. All last week and this week, I've spent all of my time basically playing nice with the other managers. And I'm not saying anything negative, but I've talked to them about the people who are the Dallas Cowboy fans, the people who, been with the company a long time, where they're from, where they vacation, where they went to high school. And so now that broke the ice in all of those situations, because again, I already know that I'm confident. I already know I have the skill set, but that piece right there is going to be the thing that helps someone either get hired or not get hired. And I think as a recruiter, you have to prep your candidate for that. You just can't let your candidate come in and not give them the good, the bad, the ugly about, what's going to happen next. And I had to.
But let me, I have the chat. So is it okay as recruiters to challenge the business to recognize that while I can't relate to this person because of their Myers-Briggs or their, personality test or their, so there's some things that will automatically, eliminate you from something, from an opportunity, and that's the missing link. That's actually a missing piece that they need on the team. So can we as recruiters say, you know what, I know you were looking for this and you want this person to be relatable, but I think this team is going to benefit from having somebody who is not like everybody else.
And they don't have to be like everybody else. I think for me, it's prepping the candidate on the candidate side that the candidate can relate to the team versus the team relating to the candidate. So just educating them about, who the people are. And of course, this last role that I'm in, I didn't do that for myself because I didn't know the recruiter. The recruiter didn't know me from a candidate.
Oh, okay.
But when I'm the recruiter, I'm doing exactly what I'm telling you. I'm telling them, hey, this is what the team is like, and giving them the good, the bad, and the ugly to say, do you think you can work in this kind of environment around these type of people? And not saying that the people are bad. That's not what I'm saying. But just making sure that they can relate. Because if you as a recruiter don't prep your candidate, if you bring them 20 rock stars in, nobody's going to get an offer. Right. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think you're doing a disservice to your candidate if you don't talk about the cultural fit. I mean, part of what your job is, unfortunately or fortunately, it's not to be an advocate for the candidate for the most part when you're working inside of a company. Even when you're trying to place someone, it's not an advocacy, even though you may personally like a candidate so much, there is a credibility that you have to still have for your own client. And it's a lot easier. You may change one or two opinions, but for the most part, during an interview process, you're going to have maybe 5 to 6 or 7 people that are going to be involved. Now, as you break out and have breakout meetings and talk about cultural fit, and you have seminars about that, I think you can do it. But I think, especially when you start going up the ladder to like more executive types of positions, part of your job is to prep your candidate. You know, I'm not doing my job if I don't say, hey, this person went to Ohio State. I mean, this person may have went to Maryland. There may be some things. This guy's a football fan. she dies in, with Kentucky.
Right.
That is a skill that separates you from the average recruiter. And there are times where the candidate may not get the job, but the fact that they had a good experience dealing with you, when you move on, that might be a candidate that may give you a referral. That might be a candidate that you reach back out and get. So you kind of have to play both roles. You want to be an advocate to an extent. You want to prep them as much as you can, but you also want to make sure that you keep that credibility with those hiring managers, that you understand the culture of the company also.
Right. So Janetta, is it a numbers game though? Can you say, you know what, if I fill out, 10 applications a day, then, in a month, I'm going to at least have 3 interviews and 2 offers?
As I'm preparing people for interviewing and resume writing, I tell them to target their resumes for the position that they're applying for. For instance, as a recruiter, I post one position, I may get thousands of applications. And if people are just sending out applications, sending out resumes that aren't targeted to my position, for instance, I get resumes that say interested in a position in the airline industry. I'm not the airline industry. You've not.
There's no nurses on the planes, at least right now.
Exactly. Or even to tell me, in your objective, seeking a position as a nurse in the trauma unit. That way, I'm looking specifically for trauma. I'm not looking for mother baby. I'm not looking for labor and delivery. So as I tell people, as you're applying for positions and you're sending your resumes out, target them. If the job description says that they're looking for ABC, you list ABC. If the job description on another one says you're looking for XYZ and you have ABC, XYZ, put XYZ first, because that's what I want to see as a recruiter. It's actually like a conversation. If you were applying for 2 admin positions and one is saying, I'm looking for an admin with Microsoft Suite, but a lot of PowerPoint because you're going to be doing presentations. Then the other one says you're looking for an admin who has a lot of Excel because you're going to be doing spreadsheets. Don't send me the resume that you sent with the PowerPoint, because that conversation sounds like I'm looking for an admin, but I really want her to have a lot of Excel. And you're saying, oh, well, I have PowerPoint.
Well, we didn't ask
that conversation doesn't, that conversation. So if you target it specifically to the job description that you're applying for and put that title there, I believe is seen more. I just think we get so many that if you don't target it and you're not specifically answering my questions, which are on my job description are the things that I'm looking for. If you don't specifically show me those up front, you're going to get overlooked. I have so many, you're going to get overlooked. And in healthcare, we were just talking about being relatable. In healthcare, everybody has a Georgia license, and a BLS. That's basic. But what's the difference in a med-surg nurse, a trauma nurse, an ER nurse, an ICU nurse? And that is personality.
Oh.
When we go to schools and I'm talking to students, everybody wants to be in the ER because it's
Exciting, right?
It's a big thing, but the ER will eat you alive. You have to move quickly. And if you're not moving, they will push you out of the way. We need people whose personalities are strong.
Right.
And I talk to students all the time. And if I'm talking to them and they are, you know, kind of shy, kind of, I won't say mousy, but just kind of, you know, I try to sway them to a med-surg position where they come in and they get really good foundation and they gain more confidence. Not to say you can't go to ER later, but to start out, you graduate, you get that nursing license, you go into the ER, they're not going to, they don't mess around. It's ER.
Right, right.
So when I'm talking to candidates and their resume comes in that they're looking for an ER position or an ICU position, and I'm talking to them and I'm picking up more of a mother baby or a med-surg position, I feel that it's my responsibility, because if they continue to interview and they're continuing to get no's, they want to know more.
Yes, yes,
So
that definitely is. That's one of the things that I see, you know, candidates talk about is I didn't get the feedback, you know, and Janice and I met through a Facebook and a Facebook group. And that's one of the, you know, comments that we see, you know, one is, you know, I'm sending out these resumes, I'm not getting anything. I'm, you know, going through the interview process, I'm not landing the job. And then that one about the number of, you know, resumes that I'm sending. So I think that that's a great point to focus on the specific job description. I remember when I was doing recruiting, and this was in the what was this, 2007 or so. So it was a while ago. We force rank the job description based on the highest level of, you know, the skills and competencies. So the things we wanted were top of the list, and those were mandatory. But I was speaking with another recruiter, and you know, they were talking about a job description. They says, no, I don't think that they did it this way. I think that, and the one specifically because the diversity and inclusion was at the bottom of, you know, the job description. And so, you know, of course I asked about that, and they said, no, I think we just put it on there at the bottom, you know, just because it was the last thing we added, which that's a whole nother story, you guys. Don't Freda, no, don't go into that area. But look, let's move on. So Fred, I want to ask you about just the whole AI bit in recruiting. You know, a lot of companies is coming out there and they're talking about the analytics and, you know, how they can get, you know, screen the, you know, these candidates and provide companies with the best, you know, candidates, you know, based on the experience and all of these things, you know, keep it just the skills and competencies and all of those things. And one of the first things that I thought about when I first heard of it is, are we eliminating people? Is the process or that the way that they've constructed that system to screen out and eliminate and bring to the top, is that another way? Because the same people who may have put that system together may be the same people who have unconscious bias. So what are your thoughts around just that whole piece? And, you know, are people, do you feel like that system, those systems are working to get the right candidates in?
Well, I don't necessarily think that they do. I think a lot of times, and I hate to say it, recruiters can get overwhelmed and have so many requisitions that they rely upon what we call knockout questions, right? That we're able to put questions in an ATS, and those that have 70 or 80%, they'll bubble up or they'll have a higher score. And those are the ones that we want to reach out to. So I don't think that it necessarily helps companies if they want to get diverse, for number one, that they want to get the right client, or the right candidate base, but also as a potential employee, that may be a sign this may not be the company for you also, right? So if you're finding that you're applying to certain roles, large companies typically do it. They've got multiple openings. They'll put 5 or 6 knockout questions. I always advise candidates to use other resources. You can apply through an ATS, but go on LinkedIn and find the hiring manager. Don't just try to go through HR all the time. If you have any ability to find out who the hiring manager, it might be the engineering manager, it might be the person in charge of purchasing or a buyer, try to connect with them on a one-on-one basis, because going back to that whole personality, culture fit, companies want to be wanted, just like candidates want to be wanted. So the fact that you took the time out, not just to cultivate a resume, but you took the time out to research who's whom in an organization and make that connection, that can do a lot and maybe supersede. I've had managers say, hey, can you call this person because they keep hitting me on LinkedIn, and that same person had applied and their resume was at the bottom of the pile in the ATS. But the fact that this person took the initiative and made some type of connection outside of just relying upon HR or the recruiter, and their profile may have caught the eye of somebody within the organization. Now that person's coming to me as a recruiter. They want me to maybe supersede everybody else that's in the ATS, and I'm going to follow up with them. So to answer your question, I think when you have a caseload where you have a bunch of requisitions trying to get maybe some entry-level positions, sometimes an ATI can be a benefit, but as you move up the ladder, don't just rely upon that. Go ahead, do some research on the organization, going back to cultivating your search. Don't just send out blind resumes. It shows that you took the initiative to do some research. Go ahead and rely upon reaching out and networking with people within that organization, and not just using the ATS as a methodology to get inside the company.
Okay, good. Well, it's definitely something to think about, because I do know that there's a lot of positions that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing constantly, especially in the HR arena, one of the things that, I kind of joked about, which is not necessarily funny, is that some of the HR positions, specifically D&I roles, may have been eliminated just before COVID. And now people are saying, well, whoa, wait a minute. Let's revisit this right now and make sure that we have somebody on our staff. So I'm definitely starting to see that. And I'm for sure seeing where people are highlighting the diversity inclusion piece inside the job description. So, but that's important. But I'm glad that you gave some examples of what people can do to continue that job search, cultivate that relationship. It's okay. LinkedIn is about LinkedIn. So it's all right to find out who the hiring manager is, who the recruiter is, talk to them, and they see that. They don't look at it as you're a pest then.
Mm-hmm.
They look at it as this person is aggressively trying to.
Yeah, we went to the same college. We may have had the same major. You might belong to some certain organization, Society of Plastic Engineers. You might belong to a sorority or fraternity. I mean, you have to leverage what you have, not just as a candidate, but just the other soft skills, the other things that you may have in common with someone within the organization that you're trying to get into. Don't just rely upon the ATS as a gateway into getting into the company.
Right. So Janice, I know I opened the door a little bit to talk about, just unconscious bias and, maybe some adverse impact and things like that, those processes that are, could be a part of the hiring process, and people just not knowing that they have those types of things that's going on. What are some of the suggestions that HR professionals can do? Give me some examples. Can you help us out with how can we identify there may be some things? What do we do?
So one of the things that Fred just talked about that's a big one for me and has always been is the schools that people went to. So there are managers that say, if you didn't go to Harvard, Yale, Brown, and Princeton, then you cannot be a good engineer because you didn't go to one of those schools. However, there are a lot of other people who did not go to those schools that are just as phenomenal. And so that's just something basic. So getting people to expand. their horizons. And even when you're doing recruiting when you're looking for minority talent, you might find them at a Harvard, Yale, Brown University, but if you really want to find them, you'll go to a HSI or an HBCU, because they have the same types of academic programs. And I think a lot of times people are pleasantly surprised, or they feel like they have to go to certain universities. So that's one. I would say
Would you just expound on the acronyms for those that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, HSI are Hispanic Serving Institutions, and HBCUs are Historically Black Colleges and Universities.
Okay.
And then Fred also mentioned fraternities and sororities. So for me, I'm in a sorority, and one of the things that I used to do when I was recruiting for, especially students of color, I would reach out to the sorority, the Divine Nine, and there are 9 different fraternities and sororities. I would reach out to those organizations if I was planning on being on campus and I wanted the information to be out. So whether I went to a majority serving institution or minority serving institution, I would reach out to those organizations on campus. I even hosted a hackathon for some tech students at the University of Maryland that was at the Jewish Center, meaning it was a center specifically for Jewish students. And we did it on a day of the week where it didn't interfere with their Sabbath day, if that makes sense. So again, just being accommodating and just doing the things, because I knew that there was a population of students, because I had done research on that university, looking at who their graduates are, what their majors were, etc., and then basically opening up to the masses. And then of course, it's sort of like casting a wide net. You cast a wide net and then you narrow it down by the people. So just those are just some basic ones. It could be anything from a way a person looks. Like I said, I feel like I was, treated with unconscious bias when I came to the interview in a suit or a dress and everybody had on shorts and t-shirts and flip-flops. I didn't, because I was in an interview and there was no time in my life that I would ever do that. So if you're going to eliminate me, not because of what I said, but what I look like, then hey, I'm not, that's not the fit. That's not the place for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's definitely things that I think recruiters have to think about, and as far as even prepping their candidate. But again, going back to prepping the organization and being able to say, you guys, you can't do this. I remember I was working on an affirmative action plan, and one of the companies was in a state or in a city right next to a military base.
Mm-hmm.
They had no veterans working on the base.
Right.
And it was interesting because we literally had the conversation about, there's no way you wouldn't, because, my experience and many, of you know that military people they land where they're, they land where they're planted. So they get
right.
up, they stay right there where they are. And so how do they not, be a good fit in your organization, especially when you're making products to service the military? But so one of the things, Janetta, when I saw that you were working in the medical profession, and just knowing my experience of, or at least talking to people in that space, they talked about some of the perks, and you had mentioned a little bit too about some of the salaries that they're getting, the high, salaries that they're getting in the organization. Can you share some of those?
Well,
perks?
those are like travel nurses where
yeah, but can you talk about maybe not the ones that you staff for, but those that you may have heard about?
Oh yeah, especially right now. I think we lost, just for an example, we lost several of our full-time nurses to go to a 10-week assignment in New York. They were given, I want to say $10,000 a month plus their living expenses. That's more money that they would make full-time in 2 months. So if
and this is registered nurses, or?
These were registered nurses. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, now this I didn't experience, but one of my colleagues did. We're having problems finding PCTs. So just basic patient care techs. And what she's saying is that patient care techs now are being hired as travelers and being paid like nurses. So a normal $12, $13, $14 an hour is now getting $28 to $30 an hour to do a temporary assignment. And so we did have nurses who left us, so left their full-time jobs or took a leave and actually went and took travel assignments, $10,000 a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they're making, $10,000 a week, and you're there for, I think it's 10 to 13 weeks. And you can come back to your job here because we need you.
Wow.
So we're really we're hurting for nurses.
Right. Well, let's take a second to, I might just see if there's anything in the chat. Because we are right at 4:45, and I definitely want to be mindful of your time. And of course, for me over here in the West Coast, it's pretty early, but as you get to the East Coast and Central Standard Time, it's, later in the evening. So right now, I don't have any participant questions. Let's see, let me look through my list and see if there's one.
Hey, while you're looking at, I was going to say, so I recruited nurses too, and that's 18 months ago now, and we were paying like $45 an hour, just because nurses here are hourly, no matter their level. So they were making 40. So I can't even imagine what COVID is doing. But the thing about these travel assignments, that's housing, food, allowance. I met a lady who traveled with her toddler, and she was making so much money that she brought the babysitter with her, and they stayed in like suite type hotels so that the other person had their own room, and they would basically babysit her toddler every day. So there's definitely
New York was paying $10,000 a week.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh, wow.
So when a nurse resigns and says that, I can make $40,000 in a month, it's like, okay.
That's all you can do.
Right. And then when they come back, when they're wanting to come back in 3 months, you're going to take them because you need them.
You still need them. Right. Oh, wow. That's high.
So even though she didn't say that, going forward, that's one of the hot careers for the next 20 years is doing anything in the whole medical field. It's just IT and medical.
Right.
You can work as long as you want. And the thing that she didn't say, I even brought nurses out of retirement, nurses who were retired. We would bring them back in because we just needed nurses really bad. And they came to work for us because it was a Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 job. So
right.
Yeah.
Wow. So you guys, we are right at right toward the end of the session, and I want to give you time if you have any last remarks that you'd like to make or anything that you'd like to share with the audience. Remember, this this Zoom is being recorded, and we will be sharing it on our social media platforms, and we will also have a session next Wednesday. Part of the building series of starting your own consulting company, as well as the following week we'll have secrets in HR. So any final thoughts that you guys have, please share.
Well, I'll start. I think in all crises, there's an opportunity, right? So what's happened with COVID, I've got an organization I deal with in Chicago. We try to network with HR people. This may be the wave of the future where most work is going to be done via Zoom or some other platform. This is an opportunity for you to maybe expand your geography in terms of where you can work and what you can do. Because there were times where I would say, you know what, I wouldn't apply for this position because that's too far. Or I'm not going to do this because I don't want to go there 4 days a week. I don't think anybody, for the most part, unless they're like a nurse or something like that, is going to go anywhere 5 days a week. And it's also a good time for companies to start thinking about, from their diversity outreach, you may have certain geographies that now talent resides in that can come work for you because they're not going to be on site every day. So the fact now that we're going to be more Zoom or some other type of platform, challenge your company from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, start thinking outside of a 20, 30-mile radius, because now most of us, for the most part, may be working like this for the near future. So I want to use this as an opportunity to be more expansive going forward.
Oh, that's actually really good. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else?
I'll just say, go ahead, Janelle.
I'd just like to add, if there's anybody that is interested in HR, for me, I think the staffing industry, getting in with the staffing industry and being able to work all aspects of HR and then finding your sweet spot. Or you may decide you want to just do generalist work, but for me, it gave me the opportunity to look at all aspects of HR and then to find my sweet spot. So anybody that's looking to break into HR, you know, wanting to get in, not knowing how, I think the staffing industry is the perfect place to start.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you. That was one of the questions that we had. So I'm glad you answered that. Janice?
I just think that, you know, work with someone that can help you from a preparation standpoint. One of the things that Veretta mentioned is that we're in an HR Facebook group together, and it has been very helpful because a lot of us have been in roles where we've been alone, and so all the time you don't necessarily have someone that you can go to reach out to vent things off. And I think having my own HR network of men and women that I know, that I trust, that I know that have my back has been probably the best thing that I've been able to do in my career, because I've been able to bounce things off of them and use their networks. And the thing about the other thing is that when you find a good recruiter, you have a friend for life. And I will tell you that a lot of the people who I've placed in roles, or, you know, they still contact me 20, 25 years later. They call for advice and say, hey, I got this opportunity. What do you think? And we'll talk it through or whatever. And I think that's one of the things that separates the good recruiters from those that are not so good, is that they establish relationships with people and they want to see the best. And it's not so much of a numbers game, place, but it's really about the person and the individual. So when you find one, keep up with them and establish a good relationship.
Well, thank you. That's definitely the best segue to, what we are doing in this group. And just if you would join our Facebook page, HR for All People. That's one of the networks that we've established, and we're really trying to, be a resource to each other, which is, crucial right now, and as we continue in our careers. So thank you so much, panelists. I definitely appreciate you joining, and let's stay connected. I really appreciate you being a part of my community. And right now I'm gonna stop the video and I'll stop the recording. And then if you can stay on, we can just have a couple seconds to chat.